The idea that someone who is working an entry-level job should be able to buy something new is a relatively recent idea. And for a long time, and I don't know that it's ever been true, we all started out as renters. I started out as a renter. I was a renter in Somerville, Massachusetts on the third deck of a triple decker above the vinyl siding king. Mm-hmm. I rented in Milford when I first moved to New Hampshire. I think that the way we get affordability is not by trying to build new little houses. I think there are a couple of ways to come at affordability if we're talking about real affordability. Sure. We come at it by repurposing older buildings because you've already got the building. Sure. So the rehab cost is going to be less than the new construction cost, which as an aside, people say, well, aren't people tearing down old buildings and isn't that terrible? I'm like, with the construction costs where they are, nobody tears down an old building that is not really desperate.
Right. That old building has to be falling apart and beyond repair for us to not use it. Okay.
Right, because of the economics. And it's so fascinating. We tend not to think about the economic drivers when we talk about town planning and urban design and how the places we live look. We forget that the federal government supported automobile-centric sprawl by its lending policies.
Sure, okay.
So we forget that the money drives how we live. So what we can do if we want to build a place that people love and want to live in is we have to think about how do we make the economics work.
Right.
So it comes at it from both sides. If we sprawl all over the countryside, the town has too much infrastructure, more than it can afford to maintain.
Right.
That's one piece of the economic pie. Another piece of the economic pie is one of the ways that we can make buildings less expensive is by requiring less land. That's another piece of the pie. A third piece of the pie is if we want our town and our village to remain a vital, vibrant place where you can get a cup of coffee and go to the bar and maybe buy some underwear, you have to have enough people close enough by to support that economy.
Sure. So, and I think in a lot of ways, there's a bigger takeaway of this is not just about some mechanical law. This is about what's possible for this town going forward and whether or not it's sustainable economically.
Absolutely.
And like in any way. We are seeing an aging population
Absolutely.
now. Young people leave and don't really come back. I mean,
it's a problem all over the state.
Yeah.
I mean, as a state, as you know, I'm a state rep, and it's one of the things we talk about a lot. And back to the question of why did people defeat the 2018 zoning? I think there was confusion. I think there were things, we felt like we did a really good job of our public outreach.
Sure.
We had 14 or 15 public engagements.
Yep.
We made changes to the proposed code after every one of them based on the information that we got at those public meetings. We had as many as 70 people, which for a town the size of us, that's a really good turnout.
Right.
The problem is that not everyone was in the room. And so for some people, when the code appeared, sort of in their minds finished, that was the first they'd ever heard of it.
Right.
They did not understand that it was built on code we already had. They didn't understand that we'd already made changes to it based on the feedback we got. Mm-hmm. So for them, it felt like, oh my God, like having a bucket of water dumped on their head.
Right, yeah.
And I'm totally sensitive to that. Clearly, we did not do everything that we could. I mean, in retrospect, are there things I would have done differently? You bet. Sure. I would have postcarded everyone in town to start with.
Right.
I would have done that in August of 2017. I would have said the town is going to undertake a simplification of our zoning code, and these are the meetings that we have scheduled at this time. There will be more meetings later so that everyone knew what was going on.
Sure,
that was a mistake. Sure. We didn't have to do that legally.
Right.
But I would totally do it now. Because I do think that it did feel to people like, where did this ever come from?
Okay.
And that's a fair assessment.
Right. Right.
And, my telling them, well, we're based on blah, blah, blah. At that point, they'd already heard their neighbors telling them that the world was going to come to an end.
Right.
And, there we were. And then we had the whole story of Ivy Vann only cares about this because she's going to make $1 million.
And that's something that people are going to have to take or leave based on your explanation of where that comes from and why you would say that in the first.
Yeah, exactly. And I totally understand that if somebody says, well, she owns all this land in the middle of town, she's clearly going to make $1 million. That's a perfectly, that on the face of it seems pretty rational.
Sure.
It doesn't happen to be true, but I can understand why someone would believe it.
Okay.
That's it. That's just a thing.
Right.
The interesting thing about the vote that we're going to have in May, the petition article to eliminate TND1 and alter TND, to eliminate TND2 and alter TND1 to where it's not really functional anymore, is that I can't use either of those codes for the parcel of land that I own. Because TND1 says you can't extend water and sewer. I would have to extend water and sewer, so I can't use those rules. TND2 says that if your parcel lies within TND1, you can't use the TND2 rules. So yeah. I didn't have a vested interest last year, and I really don't have a vested interest this year. But these codes are crucial for Peterborough to remain and grow in a way that is sensitive to the historical context.
Sure.
They really are. And also back, the economics. The other issue always is that the fear that we'll become, I don't know what people are worried about. New Canaan, Connecticut, I don't know. Mm-hmm. But they worry that we will become unrecognizable, which is one of the beauties of the form-based code, is that you pick building types that we already have.
Right.
We pick the ones we already have.
Yep.
So that we can predict what's going to happen.
Sure.
And we say, okay, the buildings need to be X number of feet from the back of the sidewalk, matching the other buildings.
Right.
You try to write your code. We talk about taking the DNA of the best part of your town and replicating it. Mm-hmm. And that's what we did, is we went out and measured. That's what you do, is you go out and you measure. Mm-hmm. So that what is allowed is the best of what we already have. And the question is, do you believe that we did a good job or not? Clearly, the town decided in May of 2018 that we had not done a good job.
Sure.
I think we did a good job. I think we did a bad job of explaining it.